Hey there. Tonight, we're going far back, not to palaces or marble temples, but to a time of gods, monsters, and mortals who wandered through a world shaped by fate and fire. You'll drift through the entire arc of Greek mythology. From the first breath of chaos to the rise of Olympus to the quiet echo of myths that still shape our world today, you'll meet heroes who bled for glory, lovers who defied the gods, and beings born from sea foam, thunder, and stubbornness. If this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it actually brings you peace. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there falling asleep to the same old stories. So, dim the lights. Let the gods whisper. Let the myths unfold. And let's begin. At the very beginning, before there was anything at all, before there were heroes, cities, or even the stars that watched silently overhead, there was only chaos. Not the noisy kind with shouting and spilled wine. No, this was capital C chaos. A vast empty potential. No sky, no sea, no light or dark, just the quiet before everything. And then slowly something stirred. From the void came Gaia, Earth herself, broad and eternal, steady beneath all that would one day walk upon her. Next came Tartarus, a shadowy depth beneath the world, more abyss than place. Then Eros appeared, not a fluttering cherub, but a raw force drawing things together, setting creation into motion. From this strange, silent symphony, more emerged. Darkness, Erebus, and night, Nyx, who gave rise to day, Chimera, and ether, light. But most importantly, Gaia gave birth to Uranus, the sky, who arched above her, a canopy of stars and cold air. Together, earth and sky would begin the first great family. And as with many families, things started out lovely and got complicated rather quickly. Gaia and Uranus had children, 12 of them. 6 daughters and 6 sons, the Titans. Among them were Oinos, who wrapped the world in a ring of water, and Hyperion, who carried the sun across the sky. There was Thais, who embodied divine law, and Minimosi, the spirit of memory. The Titans were powerful and strange, born of the earth and sky, made to shape the world. Unfortunately, Uranus found them unsettling. Perhaps they were too large or too loud. Or maybe he simply wasn't ready for fatherhood. In any case, he shoved them back inside Gaia. Yes, inside their mother, which is never a good sign in mythology or in obstetrics. Gaia, understandably distressed by having 12 children wrested into her, began to devise a plan. She forged a great sickle from stone and approached her buried sons in the dark. One by one, she asked for help. One by one they remained silent except Cronus, the youngest Titan. Cronus had a sharp mind and a patient nature, dangerous traits in combination. He took the sickle from his mother and waited. And when Uranus descended again to lie across the earth, Cronus leapt from the shadows. In one terrible stroke, he castrated his father and flung the remains into the sea. From the blood that fell to earth came strange creatures. The Arrhenius, the giants, and the Melior. From the foam of the sea, where the flesh of Uranus drifted, arose something unexpected. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, fully grown and radiant. Apparently, in Greek mythology, even acts of unspeakable violence can yield supermodels. With Uranus gone, Cronus took his place as lord of the cosmos. He freed his siblings and ruled over what would be called the Golden Age, a time when humans, newly formed, lived without sorrow, and the gods had not yet begun their meddling. But prophecy lingered. Uranus had used his last breath, or whatever equivalent sky possesses, to curse Cronus. He warned that one day Cronus too would be overthrown by his own child. Now, having personally demonstrated how this kind of thing works, Cronus decided he would avoid repeating history by doing something very traditional, eating his children. He married his sister, Rhea. Again, not unusual in divine circles. And every time she gave birth, he swallowed the baby whole. Hestia, Dido, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. Down they went, swallowed one by one, trapped inside the dark of their father's belly. Rhea was horrified, and after losing 5 children to this culinary paranoia, she came up with a plan. When her 6th child was born, she wrapped a rocking cloth and presented it to Cronus. Ever the efficient tyrant, he swallowed it without checking. The real baby, Zeus, was whisked away to the island of Crete, hidden in a cave and raised by nymphs and a divine goat named Amla. There, under the dripping stone ceiling of the cave, Zeus grew. He was fed, loved, and trained in secret. He listened to stories of the siblings he had never met. Siblings still alive, but imprisoned within their father. And as he grew taller and stronger, so too did his resolve. One day, Zeus left the cave. He disguised himself and entered the court of Cronus as a servant. There, with the help of his grandmother, Gaia, he slipped a potion into Cronus's wine, something bitter, ancient, and mildly volcanic. Cronus began to cough. Then he gagged. Then, with a noise that would echo in the halls of Olympus for generations, he vomited up 5 fully grown gods and goddesses, and also, of course, a large stone. Reunited at last, the children of Cronus stood together. They were not meek. They had not withered. They were divine and very angry. War was inevitable. The Titanomachy, the war between the old gods and the new, lasted 10 years. Cronus rallied the Titans to his side and took up residence on Mount Ophis. Zeus and his siblings made their stronghold on Mount Olympus. Between them, the world cracked and groaned. At first, neither side could win. Titans were strong, ancient, and terrifying. But the Olympians were clever. And Zeus, ever the tactician, had an idea. He descended into Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld where monsters slept. And time grew heavy. There he found the Hecatoncheires, massive beings with 100 arms each, and the Cyclops, who had been imprisoned long ago by Uranus for being a little too inventive. Zeus freed them. In gratitude, the Cyclops gave gifts. A thunderbolt for Zeus, searing and absolute. A trident for Poseidon, which could shake the seas. And for Hades, a helm of darkness, making him invisible to both god and mortal. One could argue they were the ancient world's first tech startup. Armed with these divine tools, the tide turned. Zeus hurled bolts that split mountains. Poseidon flooded battlefields. Hades walked unseen through enemy camps, sowing fear with whispers. Slowly, the Titans fell. Cronus was defeated and bound in chains of unbreakable iron. The Titans who had sided with him were cast into Tartarus, locked behind gates guarded by the 100-handed giants. Only a few escaped punishment. Themis, goddess of law, who had remained neutral, and Prometheus, who had offered quiet aid to Zeus. Atlas, the general of the Titan forces, received a special sentence. For his defiance, he was condemned to hold up the sky on his shoulders. Not the earth, as commonly misunderstood, but the endless heavens themselves. A job without days off or proper lumbar support. With victory secured, the gods turned to the world. The 3 brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, cast lots to divide the realms. Zeus received the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld. The earth meanwhile was left to be shared. Not out of kindness, but because they couldn't decide who would clean it. And so Mount Olympus became the seat of the new gods. There they would rule. There they would fight, feast, and make poor decisions that would echo through mortal lives for centuries. The age of the Titans was over. The age of the Olympians had begun. And in the shadows of that beginning, other stories waited. Stories of men, monsters, and the strange, stubborn thing called fate. By the time the gods stood reunited, the world had already begun to hold its breath. Olympus and Ophis loomed on opposite ends of the horizon like loaded spears, and between them the air turned restless. War wasn't declared with a speech. It was simply inevitable. Cronus, unseated and humiliated, had fled to Mount Ophis, dragging with him what dignity he had left and a number of deeply unsettled Titans. He rallied his old allies, Oianus, Apotus, Crus, and others. Ancient beings who had once shaped the very bones of the world. These were not creatures of palace intrigue. They were elemental forces, and they were angry. Meanwhile, at top Mount Olympus, Zeus gathered his siblings. They were few in number. Just 6, really, if one didn't count the stone Cronus had eaten. But they were determined. Hestia, calm and constant. Dido, wise and watchful. Hera, proud and already sharpening her tongue for future family squabbles. Hades and Poseidon stood ready, though the former spoke little, and the latter never stopped pacing. And Zeus, the one who had freed them, stood taller than the rest. The world unfortunately was not yet ready for them. When the war began, it shook the roots of the earth. Lightning cracked across a sky that had no business being angry, and mountains cracked as if the bones of Gaia herself were being tested. For 10 long years, the Olympians and the Titans battled. The sound of clashing forces was said to echo across time itself. And if you listened closely, you could hear the sigh of someone realizing this would take far longer than hoped. The Titans had strength and age, but the gods had youth and spite. And as history has shown, spite can go a very long way. Yet despite their energy and cleverness, the Olympians were losing. The Titans held fast on Ophis, their fortresses built from stone and arrogance. Cronus was no fool. He knew war as well as prophecy. Every attempt Zeus made to break their lines was met with brutal resistance. At night, the stars seemed to flicker with fatigue. It was then that Gaia herself intervened. Though the earth had birthed both titans and gods, she had grown weary of endless conflict. The ground was splitting, the rivers ran foul. Even mortals, those fragile little experiments, were beginning to notice that the seasons were a bit off. Gaia whispered to Zeus in his dreams. "If you want to win," she said, "you must go deeper." So Zeus did. He descended into Tartarus, a pit so deep even echoes were reluctant to visit. It was not a place of casual tourism. In its endless blackness, creatures older than fear itself were bound in silence. And there, at the bottom, he found them, the Hecatoneiris, 3 brothers, each with 50 heads and 100 arms, bound in chains that screamed when touched. Uranus had imprisoned them long ago, disturbed by their chaotic nature and the fact that shaking hands required a great deal of coordination. Alongside them were the Cyclops, the Oneid smiths of legend, unjustly locked away simply for being a little too handy with magma and steel. Zeus broke their bonds. The chains crumbled like wet parchment in his hands, and the freed giants rose. The very walls of Tartarus trembled as they stretched, arms unfurling, eyes blinking open for the first time in centuries. They did not speak. They simply nodded. The Cyclops, grateful and slightly soot-stained, offered gifts to Zeus. They gave the thunderbolt not just a weapon, but a piece of the sky itself, bottled and waiting to be unleashed. To Poseidon, they gave a trident that could shake the sea down to its bones. And to Hades, they gave a helm of darkness, a crown of sorts woven from shadow that would let him move unseen even among the gods. One could say it was their way of saying thank you, though the wrapping paper left much to be desired. With these gifts, the Olympians prepared for a final assault. The battle that followed was not so much a fight as a rewriting of reality. Zeus hurled thunder that carved rivers into mountainsides. Poseidon cracked open the earth and summoned walls of water to crash against the Titan fortresses. Hades, invisible beneath his helm, slipped behind enemy lines like a whisper. No door was safe. No thought was private. Even time seemed to pause and take notes. Cronus fought fiercely, sickle in hand, teeth bared in the stormlight. He had ruled the cosmos and tasted fear. He would not go quietly. But power once wrested from the hands of the old rarely returns to them. And slowly, inevitably, the tide turned. Zeus struck him down, not with a flourish, not with a speech, just one blinding strike of a skyforged fury, and the Titan king fell. With Cronus defeated, the rest of the Titans began to break. Some tried to flee, scattering like crows before a fire. Others dropped their weapons and knelt, hoping surrender might soften the sentence. Most were cast into Tartarus, chained behind walls of black stone, watched eternally by the Hecatoneiris. The punishment was neither swift nor particularly poetic, but it was effective. A few were spared: Prometheus, who had whispered guidance to Zeus when no one else dared. Thais, who had stood aside and measured justice even as her kin roared for blood. These were allowed to walk free, if only because Zeus was pragmatic enough to keep useful minds close. Atlas, however, was singled out. For his leadership, for his refusal to bend, he was given a special punishment to stand at the edge of the world and hold up the sky itself. Not the earth, as many mistakenly believe, the sky, an infinite ceiling with no end and no ceiling fan in sight. To this day, he holds it still with poor posture and no thanks. With the war ended, the gods stood among the wreckage. They had won, but there were decisions to make. The world could not remain unclaimed. And so the 3 brothers drew lots. Zeus claimed the sky, the winds, the clouds, the rolling thunder, and the vault of stars. Poseidon took the sea, the depths, the storms, and all that swam or drowned within. And Hades quietly and without protest accepted the underworld, a place of shadows and silence where the souls of the dead would wander. He did not complain, nor did he smile. He simply nodded. Some roles choose their bearer. The earth, curiously, was left to all, or perhaps to none. The gods would walk it, so would mortals, but it belonged to neither. With dominion divided, the gods made their home atop Mount Olympus, a place high above mortal reach, where storms danced and the air was thick with ambrosia. From there they would rule. But peace did not settle immediately. Scars remained, resentment lingered, and even in their triumph, the gods were still young. Divine, yes, but prone to jealousy, pride, and an occasional poor decision involving mortal lovers. Still, a new age had begun. The age of Titans was over. The age of Olympians had risen, and while the thrones were now filled, the story was only just beginning. With the Titans defeated and the cosmos divided, the dust of war began to settle across the battered face of world. Olympus stood untouched by the Valents, or perhaps simply indifferent to it, rising high above the Clouds, a peak of impossible beauty where mortal storms dared not tread. And it was here, amid marble halls and eternal sunrises, that the new gods began to build their rule. The Olympians were not many in number, but they were loud, bright, and impossible to ignore. They didn't ask for attention. They radiated it. And now, with the realms of sky, sea, and shadow natally divided among the three brothers, it was time for something far more complicated: governance. Zeus, now king of the gods, took up his throne atop Olympus with all the grace of someone who had just invented the concept of rulerships 5 minutes ago, and was fairly certain he was excellent at it. He was a god of thunder, yes, but also of law, order, hospitality, and curiously, justice, although the latter would soon prove to be more of an optional suggestion. With his thunderbolt in hand and his beard growing increasingly dramatic, Zeus declared the new age begun. From now on, Olympus would be the center of divine power, and he would sit at its center. Zeus ruled the skies, the clouds, the wind, the rain, and the storms. Every roll of thunder was his voice, every flash of lightning his will. He was the judge, the enforcer, and occasionally the problem. He was known to be noble, but impulsive, wise, but easily distracted, and his distractions almost always involved mortal women, swans, golden showers, or some deeply questionable combination thereof. Poseidon, in contrast, was less dramatic, but far more volatile. As lord of the sea, he claimed dominion over every drop of water from the deepest trench to the highest wave. He built a palace of coral and pearl beneath the ocean, surrounded by dolphins and sea beasts, and declared it his own private court. Poseidon was a god of earthquakes as well, which was unfortunate for coastal cities, as he was famously touchy. A bad mood from Poseidon could level entire towns. Still, he was not unkind. He had a soft spot for horses, which he allegedly created, and for sailors, whom he alternated between saving and drowning, depending on whether they remembered to offer him wine. Hades, eldest of the three, ruled the underworld, a realm of endless mist and shadow, where the dead arrived not with fanfare, but with quiet inevitability. His kingdom was not a place of fire and brimstone. It was solemn, vast, and cold. Rivers crossed it, the Styx, the Lethe, the Aran, each with its own dreadful poetry. The souls of mortals wandered there, guided by Hermes and judged in silence. Hades did not reside on Olympus, preferring the company of shades to that of his siblings. He was not evil, nor cruel, merely absolute. Where Zeus thundered and Poseidon surged, Hades endured. His kingdom did not end, and so neither did his watch. And then there were the others. Hea, queen of the gods, took her place beside Zeus reluctantly and with several raised eyebrows. She was the goddess of marriage and family, which some considered ironic given her husband's frequent adventures in shape-shifting seduction. Hera was proud, sharp, and deeply committed to her role. She did not forget insults, and she rarely forgave betrayals. Her domain included the sanctity of marriage, childbirth, and the defense of women. But she is best remembered for her jealous vengeance, often taken not on Zeus, but on the poor mortals he failed to resist. One might argue that she confused marital fidelity with pest control. Dita, goddess of the harvest, tended to the earth. It was she who made crops grow and seasons turn. When she walked the fields, grain sprouted behind her feet. She was calm, maternal, and warm, but not to be crossed. The world would learn this lesson the hard way in time. Hestia, the gentlest of the Olympians, ruled over half an home. She received the first portion of every sacrifice and kept the fire burning in every city. She avoided the intrigues of her more theatrical siblings and remained steady, the one constant in a family of shifting tempers and sudden storms. And then came Athena, born fully grown and armored from Zeus's skull, a detail best left unexamined. Athena was the goddess of wisdom, war, and crafts. She preferred strategy to savagery and thought before she acted, which made her a rare creature indeed on Olympus. She carried the aegis, a shield bearing the head of Medusa, and advised kings, heroes, and anyone who could tolerate being corrected mid-sentence. She was one of 3 virgin goddesses, sworn to no man, mortal or divine. Not that many would have dared try. Apollo and Artemis followed, twins, radiant, and deadly in their own right. Apollo was the god of the sun, music, prophecy, and medicine. He played the lyre with divine perfection, and occasionally used it to taunt people into becoming animals. His oracle at Delhi,